Tony, before we start this session, I'm just going to ask you a question about the very title itself. It says future paradigms and technologies that have the power to carry out disruptive innovations. As a matter of fact, no technology or paradigm has the power to carry out disruptive innovation. Human beings have the power to carry out disruptive innovation. They may use technology, they may use paradigms. But technology in itself cannot create disruption, can it?
I would fully agree with you. In fact, you'll see that in my introduction here, that it's all about the consumer and the people. The technology is the facilitator for the actual direction of the industry.
All right. Gentlemen, once again,
so if everybody could take their seats, and for the previous panelists, let's get through it. I want to share some technology updates that are going on around the world. So just a brief introduction. I am Italian, so Tony D'Onofrio, lots of vowels in my name. I lived in the United States for a long time, so I'm half American. And then I'm currently living in Switzerland. So by default, I am a global individual. And what I'm going to cover today in the next 10 to 15 minutes is a global view of where retail is at, where is it going, and in my opinion, what are some of the key disruptive technologies that are driving retail. And I'm going to look at it from that point of view at the global level. I'm going to briefly first introduce Tyco, but I'm going to spend the majority of the time talking about the direction of technology as I see it. And very good question from in the beginning here. It's really not about the technology. It's about you and I and all of us as consumers in terms of the direction that we are taking retail, which is different than what it was. In fact, you may not know it, but you're currently living in the third major mega trend that is reshaping retail for the next generation. And I'm actually going to take you through that and explain that. And then the panel is going to elaborate with me in terms of some of those ideas. So let me start with a very brief introduction about Tyco. Tyco International is an $18 billion company based out of Ireland with operations worldwide. I am part of Tyco Retail Solutions, which is a $1 billion operation and one of the larger segments. We primarily work with the world's largest retailer. So I heard Nike, Walmart, Inditex, all the major retailers around the world. We work in deploying security technologies, and also we deploy a lot of now store operations technologies. We do a lot at the item level, protecting consumer items, first from a security point of view, but going forward, and I'm going to show you some example from an information point of view, actually putting information on consumer items and then bringing value to the retailer to improve the customer experience. And I will show you some of that, and you can see the numbers there. We protected 119 billion consumer items, 50 billion of which are at source. We've been around a while, we are growing, and India is a major part of our operation that we see a lot of potential going forward, and we want to make investments. I think the best way to show you Tyco and the technology investments that we're making and the focus that we're making is to show you a video. that's enough about Tyco. Let's talk about where I see technology and retail headed, just some of my views. I actually spend a lot of time studying the retail industry. I do a lot of activity online, actually. And last year, I was named a top 50 global retail influencer by a US publication. So you can actually see me online, and they can actually follow a lot of the industry activities, both on my personal blog and also on the different industry updates that I provide on a daily basis. So this is a topic that I spend a lot of time studying. So in my opening, I said we're in the middle of a major megatrend. These are the three major megatrends that have shaped retail. The first one was the manufacturer was in control of the channel, and that was really prior to the 1970s. And they were in control of the channel because they had the information. And it's really about technology and information that drives retail going forward. And so prior to the 1970s, the Procter & Gamble's, the Unilevers, they were in charge of retail. In 1974, all that changed with the barcode. The barcode changed the paradigm in terms of who had the information. With scanning, the retailer now had the information, and so the power shift with the information shifted to the retailer through the barcode, because they were able to actually dictate to the manufacturer exactly what they wanted to put on the shelf. And in fact, that change was dramatic, and it actually led to major chains like Walmart expanding dramatically because they took advantage of that information and utilized it to maximize the retail channel. And that's really the 1970s. In about 2010, with the advent of this little device, it started changing again. And we're in the middle of the next mega trend, really driven by the consumer. The consumer is now in charge of retail. You may not know it, but they are the digital shopper that you saw in that video, and they're actually now in charge of retail. And they're being supplemented very quickly by connectivity to the internet. So in other words, the smartphone and the mobile technology is the driver, and all these devices very quickly coming online on the internet, or has been labeled as the buzzword, Internet of Things, is driving this connectivity that now is putting the consumer in charge of future retail. And that's a major, major shift that is taking place right now. Just to put it in perspective, how fast this is happening, one of my favorite charts is what you see here, which is the pace of technology adoption. Whether you like it or not, we are in the middle of adoption trends that are accelerating at exponential time spaces. So, and this is an example that you see there where it says adoption pace. So for example, for a technology to reach 25% of the US population, electricity took 47 years. For telephones, 35 years. For radio, 31 years. For color television, 18 years. For mobile phones, 13 years. For the internet, 7 years. Facebook, 2 years. 50 million people in the US are online with Facebook. So technology cycles are dramatically accelerating. And the two key drivers that will bring this to countries like India is the comments that was said earlier, which is the mobile penetration. The mobile penetration is high with feature phones. It's accelerating to smartphones, as the individual on the prior panel said, and it's reflected in these statistics. Mobile broadband connections are going to be 5.1 billion worldwide by 2017, and mobile data volumes are going to exponentially increase to 11.2 exabytes. So the amount of information that's out there is going to dramatically increase. At the same time, everything that you can imagine is getting connected to the internet. From your thermostat at home through Nest and Google to your locomotive engine that General Electric, to even your jet engine, is all going to get connected to the internet. And that's really the Internet of Things. And it's right now at 12 billion. By the year 2020, it will be at 50 billion. So connectivity and also mobile are the key driver of this next generation. Now, what does that mean for retail? And instead of me speaking, what I'd like to show you next, because I'm a visual guy, being Italian, I'm going to show you a video from an actual retailer on what they consider their digital journey. And this video is from Belk department stores in the United States and the digital journey that they're taking their shoppers on. Sound, please. So that's an actual retail produced video to showcase the direction that they see retail going. I'm going to quickly move to some of the material because I want to get to the panel. There's a lot of stats on this chart that shows the transformation that retail is going through. The one example there is the amount of digital influence. For example, in just 2 years, it's gone to $1.5 trillion. The amount of global online retail sales continues, yes, but stores are not going away. By 2020, 2025, it will be about 4.3 trillion, but it's only 20% of total retail sales. So there'll still be lots of stores selling. RFID will continue to expand. There will be a major contributor. Wearables will be a major contributor to the data journey, even for retailers. And to me, a couple key favorites, India will play a major, major role for retail going forward. In fact, as The Economist put it, by the year 2022, India will be the third largest economy, retail economy in the world. China will be number one, that will surpass the US. US will be number two, China and India will be number three. So India will be a major contributor. And finally, the journey will be digital. The journey will be digital. So, and that's already reflected, for example, in the amount of time that people spend looking at screens. Phones takes a lot more minutes than does television and does PCs in terms of where people are spending their time. I'm going to close to get to the panel with one final video, which again, from a retail point of view, because if you think about the eighth wonder, the transformation of retail, lots of technologies could actually apply to that. And we actually had a very spirited debate in the prep room in terms of what that's going to look like. But the most important technology to me that we all have to figure out is the consumer, and figuring out what's in the hands of a consumer that really makes them decide going forward. And also think about those sensors increasingly, because sensor technologies will increase. And about 2 months ago, Inditex, which owns the Zara brand, announced their deployment of RFID that Tyco is deeply involved with. And I want to show you their video from their website in terms of how they see that technology impacting the customer experience as a closing before we go to the panel. So just in closing, if you walk into the Inditex or the Zara store here in India, you will find one of these tags on their clothes. You may think this is a security tag. It's actually an RFID carrier and a security tag. This is carrying the item level information that allows everything that you're seeing there. And that's really the future in terms of putting a lot of information directly into sensor devices that will appear in stores. So let's move on to the panel. So what I'd like to do is actually have each of the panelists talk a little bit about the disruptive technology that they see in retail from their perspective, and then we'll go around to each of the panelists. So I will start with Zulfi.
My name is Zulfi Taibji. I'm at the company Value Access. We are in the gift card, prepaid card, loyalty, and the gift card distribution business across Asia. I'd like to talk about a couple case studies. And the first one I'd like to talk about is a company called Pacific Coffee, which is a Starbucks equivalent in Hong Kong and China. They have about a few hundred stores in Hong Kong and a few hundred now in China. And when we first started with them, we did a gift card, prepaid card program, which then evolved into a loyalty program. So it started off with a MagStripe card, and the same card does where you can add money as well as earn and burn your points for your loyalty. A year later, they wanted to migrate, upgrade the program, and we added on an RFID card, which is a tap and go card. We then added on e-cards, and lately, about a couple years back, we now have a mobile app where you can download and you have your own personalized QR code. So all you do is when you go to the counters, you just tap your phone against the POS to A, pay for your coffee, or earn and burn your points for your loyalty. The beauty about this program is that it's multi-device, and the identifier in the store is multiple. So I can have all of the above. So one day I may use my RFID, one day I may use my mobile, the third day I may use my normal MagStripe. So I, as a customer and the consumer, am empowered to choose what I want to do. Another example and case study out of South Korea, and this is very interesting because the last 2 days we've been hearing a lot about online versus bricks and mortar, which is working, which is going to be better, this and the other. Tesco launched in South Korea a few years back, and they had a bricks and mortar business. They were the number 2 person there. They decided to go online, and they did fairly well. But what they found is that the South Koreans are extremely busy and constantly on the go. They did what you call a hybrid model. Online to offline to online. What they did is let the store come to the people. Majority of people in South Korea travel by subway. So what they did is they took the subway walls and they created a Tesco wall. So each wall had, say for example, dairy section. And there were pictures of all milk, cheese, various types of cheese. It looked exactly like you were standing in front of a section of a Tesco market. Customer goes in there while on their way home or way to work, chooses, okay, I want to buy this butter, puts his phone, click. Moves on to the next section, chooses which milk they want, moves on, chooses the cheese they want, then the next product and the next product and the next product. Everything gets added to the basket. At the end, you click and pay, multiple ways, multiple channels of payment, and you choose where you want it delivered and what time you want it delivered. A very interesting hybrid model that they created and extremely successful. On this, I'd like to take this to Yaqinan with Hypercity, running similar chains in India and get his viewpoints on how this is and will it work in India? Will this happen?
Thanks, Zulfi. Okay, so how many people in the audience are actively retailers? Hands up.
Actively what?
Active retailers.
Retailers.
Retailers, working in retail. How many in the audience are actually connecting with customers every day? Okay. And by and large, I believe 100% of us are a customer to some or the other retailer. Yes? Excellent. Now, let me just start by giving you a little bit of a definition of disruptive technology. What it basically means is that I am now forced to use some technology in my business which earlier I never wanted to. Is the definition clear? So it's primarily what it says is that I am as a retailer now forced to use a technology because of a particular demand, which earlier I would have said not required. So that's the definition of disruptive technologies here. I will take an example on 2 or 3 aspects to clarify how does disruptive technology impact a retailer. First is, we have all heard the concept of the 4 P's in marketing. Okay, it goes with product, price, promotion, and place. What disruptive technology is doing to us right now has shifted the 4th aspect of place out of the 4th position of consideration to the 1st. As a retailer now, I have to accept the demand from the customers and give him the offering at the place and the time and on the medium that he wants it. That is what is happening with disruptive technology for me. So it's a complete paradigm shift in how I offer my products and services, and I have to adopt to the new technology. Second area is where we all know that time is money. Today's customer, as long as the retailer is being able to give him the product and offering where he saves time, that's the only way I can make my money as a retailer. So once again, customer is becoming king out over here and driving this necessity that I have to adopt in the way he wants me to do the business. That's a huge paradigm shift from where we were earlier. Now, these disruptive technologies that we are having in the business are forcing us as a retailer to start competing for the future. And if the retailer do not compete for the future, they are surely competing for irrelevance. Because tomorrow, there will be no customer who will be left who will be wanting your products and services until unless you provide it to them the way they want it. And that's what's happening with technology also, and the availability of technology, whether it's on a mobile phone, whether it's on a tablet, or whether it's just a kiosk anywhere, or using the QR code. So that's the challenge that we are having, and how a retailer has to prepare himself to actually face the current demand of the digital customers in today's world. That's, for me, what I get it from my business point of view, and that's how disruptive technologies are impacting us.
Thank you. Alok, would you like to comment?
Hi everyone, I'm CEO of a company called FreeCharge, which builds products for ROI-driven customer acquisition and customer frequency improvement for your retail stores. And I want to leave you with 2 insights in this space. First of all, the screen that Tony talked about in terms of how the disruptive technologies are coming out and how electricity took about around 50 years to become accessible to 25% of Americans, and how internet has taken about 7 years to be accessed by about 25% of Americans. How many, just look back in like last few years, how much time it took for these smartphones to be accessed by 25% of Americans? It took hardly like 3 years. 2007 was the time when this phone was launched. It feels like we have been living with these phones forever. How much time it took WhatsApp to be accessed by 25% of the Americans? About maybe 2 years? So the first innovation which took like 50 years to become accessible to 25% folks has moved to a time when a disruptive innovation is accessed by more than 25% people in less than 2 years. So it is not just that we are evolving faster, the evolution is happening faster, but it is also that the pace or the acceleration itself is accelerating. So evolving at a much faster pace than ever in the history. And that brings me to the next point that I was going to share. In this forum, many of the times I got a feel that we are focused on how e-commerce is eating from the pie of the offline retail, how e-commerce is growing, how it is the future, this is going to take over everything in the world. But the fact of the matter is 90% of the sales still happens in the offline store. And that number is roughly true for America as well. Whereas in America, the e-commerce is by far the most advanced, in the most advanced stage than compared to India. So if we assume that India is also going to be as advanced in e-commerce as America is, it is still fair to assume that e-commerce is, about 90% of the sales will still be made into the offline retail stores. But the problem is that the methods and the technologies and the practices that the offline retailers are using are still traditional. There is very little access to data to understand what is really going on in the business, and based on those insights, adapt and change the strategies to get more and more sales for your stores. So these methodologies need to change with the new kind of innovations which are happening. New innovations which are happening. Now if you take Amazon in US, when Amazon was evolving in US compared to Walmart, the only innovation that was supporting Amazon was internet. That was the only disruptive innovation on which it was building up its business, and Walmart was not able to figure that part out. But today there is not one innovation happening in India or in the world. There are actually multiple innovations happening. First of all, mobile is leading the revolution in terms of the innovation. All of that is being powered by cloud. And then you have got a lot of other technologies building upon, like Wi-Fi, RFID, beacon, NFC, all of these kind of things which are coming out as well. So there's no reason why what happened in US 10 years, 15 years back is going to get repeated in India. Today, offline retailers have got far more access to technology in the form of smartphones, in the form of beacons, etc., that many new solutions will emerge, which will enable the offline retailers to be far more efficient than what they are today. And those are the kind of business practices that we need to start thinking about and start evolving towards. Second thing that I want to touch upon is that the whole premise on which e-commerce is built is being crazy about the data. They know what percentage of people saw your ad, what percentage of people clicked on your ad, what percentage of those people came and bought stuff from your store, of course the online store, what percentage of people actually who came to the store actually purchased. They do all kind of cross-sell, upsell. Once a customer has gone out of your store, they do all kind of reach back to the customers through emails, through remarketing, all kind of sophisticated marketing technologies. They are all crazy about data. And that craziness about data is what enables them to operate business in a much more depth, with a much more ROI-driven approach, with knowing so much more insights into what is happening in the business. And those are the kind of practices that we also need to start adopting in the offline world. And the good news is today technology is already there, which can actually facilitate doing all of these things. Only thing is, just be focused on the consumer use cases. The question today is not what consumer is needing from you, what consumer wants to buy from you, but the question should be more of what you can provide consumer. A consumer is just coming to buy something from your retail store, doesn't mean you should just staff that product or store that product and sell it off. But what are the other experiences that you can build around selling that product to the consumer by way of using these technologies, what we need to be focused upon. These are my two thoughts.
Thank you very much. Ranjan?
So I think innovation in retail will always revolve around two things. One, the customer. The second is the employee. These are the two most important aspects in retail that you've got to handle. The number of customers who are walking into your stores, how do you treat them? How do you give them the experience? How do you get them back? How do you engage with them is going to become very, very important. That's becoming the biggest priority for every retailer. Given that the market space is expanding and it's the same customer that we all are fighting for. So what is going to be the differentiator for each of us to bring to the customer? The second most important aspect for innovation will be around the employee. How do we simplify the life of the employee? We all know the rate of attrition in the front end in a retail store. How do you innovate to make life simple for him? How do you innovate to keep things much more focused, much more easy for him? None of these guys who are there in the store have been taught to use a Facebook. How do we make things, how do we make front ends which are much more easy for them to just pick up, learn it, work with it? So I think most of the innovations will be around these two areas. As a retailer, As bestseller, we've been focusing on these two core areas. Everything else will revolve around this. We are working towards how do we make everything much more real-time analytics, much more real-time information sharing, so that a lot of these innovations will be in these specific areas.
Thank you. Samarji.
I think I'm introducing myself. I'm Samarjeet. I worked in the internet retail industry for the last 14 years. Only worked in internet retail, set up 2 companies and we sold. And Ixola, as a company, we run for the last 6 years, one of the largest services company in internet retail and e-commerce in country. Hearing everybody, and normally last one can have the last laugh or could be the last idiot, because you've very little to say. When I was thinking about it, whatever went through, it reminded me of the reason I got into internet. At fresh 2000, I was thinking what career to start. And I read a quote from Tim Berners-Lee. Tim Berners-Lee is the inventor of internet. And he said that internet would lead to democratization of the world. At a young age of whatever, just passed out of college, it had a huge impact on me. And I think that's what we're discussing here. I think it has really led to, the digital has led to that entire revolution where consumer is the most powerful and the central guy, or the girl, sorry, no gender bias here. And I think the whole technology discussion or any kind of a business discussion previously used to evolve from what you make and how you distribute. And it is completely turned it the other way around, and it has become how I want it, or as a consumer. So one big thing I have been seeing in the last 14 years is that internet has empowered, enabled, and made consumer as the center of business. What impact it makes on technology is, I think it's going to have huge impact on businesses and the way businesses will run, or the way businesses will die. As to say, we have examples of Blockbuster, we have examples of Best Buy struggling, we have examples of Bookers. Everybody struggling in a category just because the whole distribution just went away. So that's my first thought, is that consumer is in the center, and now every technology has to evolve around it. Since consumer is in the center, one of the bigger trends I'm seeing is that now consumer wants things in his own way. It's my way or the highway, a kind of a situation in exact right terms. So a consumer says, today, I personally think the panel is too old, because our representation as a consumer is a far younger. As when we look at India, it's a very, very young consumer base which we are addressing. It's a very impatient, it's a very, very demanding consumer which you are tackling. And it is a result of technology which is, I call them as not teenagers, I call them as screenagers, right? They're just shifting screens, and they're very, very compelling, very, very impulsive consumers. Now, if you have to cater to them, they demand customization. They say, cater to me as me, not as a bunch of people. So I personally think customization is one trend which you will see across. The second thing is, the consumer wants to be treated in a very, very personalized fashion, saying, give me what exactly I want, the way I want, and at the price I want. This is easy said than done, and I personally think these two strong trends which are coming out of the consumer. I'll give you some examples which I have seen. So I don't know if you know of companies like Lenskart, and if you'll go to similar companies across the globe. Today, if you're buying a frame for yourself, it is the experience of buying online is more better than buying it in an offline store. I'll give an example. So there's a technology where you go to a website, you choose 4 frames, and you can see 4 frames together on your face. You can move your face at the live fashion. You can't do it in a store also, right? How do you wear four frames together? So a customization, personalization at a very, very high level. That's from a consumer side. I see then, if this is the trend, then technology's impact on businesses is going to be, again, a completely reverse thing. So because consumer wants this, he wants it this way. Now the supply chain, the manufacturing, the entire technology which employees are using exactly needs to adapt to it. So I personally think the internet is flipping things, or digital is flipping things on its head, and entire back-end technology also needs to change to ensure consumer needs to be given this experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Suresh, would you like to comment on this section too? Just a little bit about technology from a consumer point of view?
Right. I made a few observations from what I've heard. All this sounds very fancy. We have technology, we have RFID, we have mobile phones, we have customization, we have personalization, we have ultra high. Can I get audio back? Check. Yeah, let's come back. We have ultra high levels of customization, personalization. I have a question for everybody in the audience. If everything is so fantastic on the technology side, how many of us have bought a product or a service and literally torn your hair out in frustration trying to reach consumer service or customer service? Wanting to kill somebody from the airport to a bookstore to buying a washing machine, all of us have faced it, right? You buy a product and they treat you extraordinarily well. You go back and complain that it's not working and finished. You are relegated to a call center, you're relegated to the back end. Challenges, I think, for companies, extremely easy to implement technologies when the customer is buying something, because that's a value transaction, right? The business tends to make money. When the customer calls, it's a cost transaction. It's actually costing you time and money to answer a customer's questions, address grievances, and that's where you're going to skim. And that's going to test whether you actually believe in the importance of the customer as a human being or simply as a transaction entity. So as long as you're buying something, it's the famous rule of going into a French restaurant or a French store. If you go to Paris and try shopping, nobody speaks English. The moment you want to buy something from the store, they magically speak English. The moment you want to return something in the store, sorry, no, palais, I don't know. Right? So a lot of companies are going to face this challenge. The technology is going to answer one side of it, but management practices are going to have to answer the other. It's very easy to say that the customer is the king and the customer is the center of our businesses when the customer is an abstraction of an average of 1 million people. But nobody here and nobody in the real world is an average of 1 million people. Just as Samarjit said, every customer is a unique individual. So many companies are going to put processes, technology, management practices, and their actual management ahead of the customer. While they say the customer is the center, it's not going to actually happen. No amount of technology is going to change that. Number 3, I think you need to remember that retail and technology are small parts of a consumer's life. Their life is about relationships with family, kids, PTA, school, sports, health, all of this. You shouldn't make the mistake that the entire customer's life is about retail, about technology, and that we own the customer. My last point is that disruption, in my experience, always comes from where you least expect it, never from where you expect it. Right? All the camera companies were competing for market share, and Nokia became the largest camera seller in the world. Right? All railway companies in the 1850s were competing for market share, and their stock was extremely highly valued. They comprised the best investments. They were the superstars of industry in the 1800s in America. Not one of them survived today. 2 young men, Wilbur and Orville, a few 100 kilometers from where they were building railway mansions, flew a little plane for maybe 30 feet. So the competition didn't come from other railways. Disruption always comes from where you least expect it. And therefore, and I give you this as a guarantee, e-commerce will be disrupted. Traditional retail modern retail disrupted traditional retail disrupted farmer to consumer. E-commerce thinks that they've arrived and nothing is going to ever disrupt them, and they have the best business model in the world because they can reach consumers. I am certain that within 5 years' time, the e-commerce business model will be disrupted by something that we don't even expect today.
Thank you very much. I'd like Yakin to actually comment on it.
Well, how I see it is, you give the example of Nokia. At some point in time, it was the largest camera company, and others did not see it coming. For the Canon and the Kodaks of the world, it was disruptive technology for them. They did not see it coming. Today, as a retailer, when I'm operating a brick and mortar store at Hypercity, all right, selling food, grocery, and everything that we have on the offer with the customers, what is happening is that a customer is now choosing to decide where I buy it and how I buy it. Now, I don't have much of a choice right now, but to accept this demand and move into that space so that I do not become irrelevant in 3 years' time. Now, that's where the challenge is being faced by the retailers, and that's where we are here, that even if we do not want to move on that platform and bear that extra cost of offering your product and service in a different manner, we have no choice. And that's why we have to go ahead and ensure that we don't become the Kodaks and Canons of the world in the next 3 years or 4 years time when the e-com industry takes over completely. Well, they might get destructive, they might have some other new challenges coming on going forward. And if they do not foresee that coming and they do not adopt the destructive technologies then for themselves, they will become irrelevant too. So as of right now, as a retailer in brick and mortar companies, I surely feel that I have to observe this demand from the digital customer and prepare myself so that I can meet their requirements. That's where we are.
So Suresh, 2 comments on your observations. The first point that you made, as customer is sort of struggling later on after the sales. When I was a kid, I still distinctly remember, we used to go to these normal kirana shops to buy stuff, or the tailor to get our clothes stitched, etc. That was the ultimate amount of personalization that used to happen at that time. If I'm going to a tailor, I'll say, Bhaiya, 2-inch longer trousers because I've grown taller, and it'll be done because the measurement is already there, everything is there. If I stop buying from a kirana shop and go to a different shop, the other guy will hold me in the street, he'll say, Beta, you didn't come for last 15 days, what's up, everything okay? Yep. You're no longer turning back. That was the ultimate stage of CRM, customer relationship management, loyalty, whatever way you want to term it. What happened? We started automating it, we started creating processes around these, we started making these things at a mass scale, as a modern retail is called, and all of that personal touch was lost. And that is exactly the whole reason why all of these kind of problems are faced by all the companies at that scale. So this is a scale problem. This is nothing but the scale problem. And it's only a matter of time that somebody puts in the mind and effort to solve all of these scale problems through technology. So that is one observation. Second is on this, e-commerce will be disrupted very soon. I actually think it is being disrupted. The problem is that when a disruption is happening, it is not viewed as a disruption for a fairly long time till it actually happens. When this Wright or White brothers were building this plane, nobody could anticipate that this is going to happen like this, and everybody was discarding that team that, hey, they are just bunch of kids playing with some cool stuff. Until later when people realize that it's become a serious innovation. I actually have a term for e-commerce disruption that is going to happen. I call it as commerce E. And my term commerce E is because when internet, mobile, technology, all of these things put together will be used to make offline retail super optimized, personalized. That is the state which I call as commerce E. It is not there yet, but there are a lot of ingredients which are coming along which will make it happen in very near future, in my view.
Go ahead, you want to comment?
I had a point. To your point, I felt that, I think from a technology perspective, India is in a very interesting state. US, the e-commerce or the disruptive, whatever we're discussing, happened post the modern retail had already got 80% of the market share. In India, the e-commerce came in with modern retail at the same time. So fundamentally, you're fighting unorganized with technology and modern together at one time. So I personally think that e-commerce, from your comment on the consumer side, I think e-commerce as an industry or technology-enabled commerce, let's not even call it e-commerce, has a unique opportunity to serve the consumer, treat him as an individual, each individual separately, and potentially be a market leader even ahead of modern retail. I think it's a great opportunity which Indian industry has. I personally think the industry has done a bad job starting 2001 till 2008 by sending or not caring about consumer, sending them potentially not so great products, and potentially wasting a great opportunity which they had for those 8 years. Post 2008, 2009, I think Indian, potentially capital driven, the industry has significantly changed and there is a huge emphasis on consumer. My understanding is that majority of the experiences you spoke about would be pre that era, and now potentially all the retail or technology oriented companies are more focused on customer delight, and if they focus on disruption, if they focus on consumer, they can potentially deliver an experience which can be extremely world class.
So if you want to comment, you also picked up the microphone. Go ahead.
I had a question actually. Who's driving the disruptive technology? Is it the consumer or is it the retailer?
Two random kids in the garage actually.
It is actually the consumer now. Let me give you an example out over here. Up till a few years back, speaking from technology point of view, we used to always evaluate technology as leading technology and bleeding technology. And we never used to go into the bleeding technology bit because it was too costly to adopt and implement, and the returns were never there. Today we have reached in such a place, I cannot ask this question anymore whether this is going to be leading technology or bleeding technology, because the customer is now telling me that if you do not give me your offers and services by this platform at this time and space, I am not going to be interacting with you. So it's completely changed. Earlier I used to select, I can select a channel of doing retail business. It was clearly there. I can do click and collect, which is now catching up very much out over here. Previously it was just about e-com which was there, or it was orders by phone. Now I could choose those channels without having so much impact whether what the customer is going to be doing. With new technology, customer has so much of option. Now he's compelling me to actually provide him products and services with that technology. So to answer the question, now it's changed. It's the customer or the consumer who's telling me what to do. And that's where it is compelling me to saying, I have no choice but to actually bring in this technology into my business so that I can serve my customer and I can continue to serve him. Else, I have a problem.
I think it's the two guys in the garage. To me, it's neither the retailer or neither the technology, it's the application of technology. There's some random guy sitting somewhere who thinks differently because neither he works for the retailer, neither he's the one who invented the internet. He thinks through that internet and retailer could be joined like this, and he puts an application and the retailer needs to adapt to it and the consumer quickly catches on. I personally think the dilemma is the consumer is catching on faster and the retailer is lagging. And till the time this will happen, there will be a new random guy in the garage who will invent another application and make more money than the retailer.
So I can tell you we had a very, very lively discussion in the pre-room, and that continues, and I only got to 3 questions out of my 15. And we really want to give the audience time to ask questions because I think it's more important that we make sure we address your subject. If you can go to the microphone, please, back there. Thank you.
So I'm an e-commerce consultant in Silicon Valley and now in India. I was helping Jeff Bezos set up Amazon more than 15, 20 years ago. And 5 years later, he tells me, Deep, I did not want to get into logistics. I wanted to get into e-commerce. So Mr. Venkat, your point about customer service. See, in India, in America, as a student, I could buy a pair of jeans, and we could return it 6 months later. In India, even the next day, with the proper receipt, they will not honor your purchase. Now, when you go e-commerce, there are some stores like Snapdeal and Flipkart that are entirely e-commerce. So when you buy something, it took me 6 months to get a refund from Snapdeal. So what I'm saying is this concept of customer service, that is the most disruptive thing. We can talk about fancy ERM and so on and so forth, but it's of no use. In India, customer service does not exist as a concept. So when you go entirely e-commerce, who do you catch? Who do you catch? These guys are entirely in the cloud.
Right, so his question is, in the world of e-commerce, and at least in a regular store, I can walk into Hypercity and I can keep on shouting till you come down and pay attention to me.
Okay.
What do you do in e-commerce?
Well, I don't know if you have encountered bad word of mouth on Facebook about a retailer. Have you heard about it? Do you think we'll be worried about that, yes or no? I would, as any retailer, would he be wanting his customer to be unhappy and going to the Facebook, not even going to the Facebook, on the phone, through the Facebook app, just say, shitty service provided by XYZ?
Believe me, sir. For 6 months, I went and posted extreme negative comments about Snapdeal, and then I found 2,000 more comments. They don't care.
Okay, so let me answer this.
There is a grain of truth in what he's saying.
I wouldn't encourage you to do that on our website for that matter. But if it happens, then within 24 hours, I assured you that there will be a call to you. Within 24 hours.
Your stores are so good, I like going to your stores. I will never do e-commerce on your store because your service is so good in the store.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right, so there you have an advantage of physical commerce over e-commerce. Yeah, Samarjit.
I personally think that the digital will ensure that whichever company you were mentioning or anyone else listens to the consumer, because otherwise their business will not survive. it could be temporary that the comment or the 2,000 comments have come through. I personally felt that if the digital was not there, there was nowhere you could complain except going to the store. Today, each and every company, whether it's a retailer or a services company, extremely cares about what gets said about them anywhere on the web, right? And it cannot be removed, right? So I personally think digital will ensure that the customer service culture comes in India, and the retailers or any businesses will be compelled to make sure their policy and framework is in favor of the consumer.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to intervene. I think we're about to start the next session. Tony, if you'll allow me, I'm just going to sum up all the key thoughts of all the panelists before we conclude. Let me start with Tony D'Onofrio's thoughts. For those of you who missed it, not paying attention, or you simply want a condensed Twitter version of the entire panel discussion. Tony's most important point is that we're in the third major mega trend in retail. The first trend was dominated by manufacturing. Henry Ford famously said you can have it in any color as long as it's black. That was significant, a statement from a manufacturer saying that you'll have it as long as I want you to have it. The second was the retail revolution prompted by the barcode, when the retailer could tell Henry Ford, black's not selling, but beige is selling, so keep your black and give me more brown cars. And now we're in the midst of a consumer revolution where the consumer is telling the retailer, I want this product, I want it at this time, and I want it in this way, and the retailers are telling the manufacturer. There's an important thing about rate of change for those of you who didn't go to, who didn't attend physics class or don't remember physics clearly. The definition of acceleration, right? So the definition of speed is the rate of change of place, right? If you move from here to there, the rate at which you're moving is speed. The rate of change is acceleration. So by very definition, it is going to exponentially increase because it's rate of change squared, right? So it shouldn't surprise you that it takes only 7 years to adopt the internet and only 3 years to adopt the cell phone, because that is acceleration. India will be the third largest retail economy in the world. That's another point that Tony made. And the growth journey in retail from here on out will be digital. Let me tell you, Alok Goel's key points. One of the points he made was this rate of change is the new normal. It's here to stay. Alok Goel also says the offline store, the traditional offline store, will need to change dramatically and adopt technology in order to continue to exist. India may not follow the US pattern. Just as we leapfrogged CDMA technology and went to GSM directly in mobile phones, we may do the same kind of leapfrogging in the retail digital space. And his last point is, if you're a retailer, be crazy about data. Data is going to be your biggest friend when you need to mine it and when you need to do analytics. Ranjan Sharma asks, if you want to stay in business, what is your differentiator? Why are you different from everybody else? Second, very important point, he said, managing your employees. That's going to be a huge challenge, keeping them motivated, informed, and continuing to sell your product. And the last point, he said, nothing substitutes real-time data. Real-time analytics and real-time information is the power that you have. Samarjit Singh said, consumers want retail on their own terms, my place, deliver what I want, where I want, when I want. He also said that we have impatient, demanding consumers who are only going to get more impatient and demanding, not less. So better get used to it. Zulfi Tayyabji said, multi-device retail access, like the example of the coffee chain that he used. You can use your phone with NFC, you can use your RFID card, you can use your smartwatch, or you can use a physical card. And that experience has got to be seamless across any consumer device that you use. That's one key to retail success. Yakin Ghazi says, saving a customer's time, because time is the new money. So if you can save the customer's time, that's one of the keys to retail success. And he also said if retailers don't compete for the future, retailers will be irrelevant. I hope that's an accurate summary of all the points that were made. I have one quick announcement to make. After this session, Krish Iyer of Walmart will be speaking in Hall A, which is the hall to my right. So for those of you who would like to hear Krish Iyer speak, you need to head to Hall A. With that, I'd like to thank Tony and our panelists. Thank you very much for being on the panel. Thank you for being a patient audience.